Good day, this is Graham here. I would like to begin a discussion about climate change that is totally opposite to the one that has preceded today. So far, due to the ignorance of the meaning of climate change, and no one has actually said what it means, the politicians and the left and the hierarchy, whoever they are, the elite in the media, have tried to instill fear, division and hate within society over an idea that the climate is changing and that human beings are the cause of it. And pernicious politicians with only selfish aims in their mind have tried to stir up trouble in society by saying you are to blame, and you are to blame for causing climate change, and you are to, as if one or a few human beings are the cause of all the climate changes that have ever happened. And it actually doesn't make sense at all to go pretending blame to anyone about something that, even if human beings are involved with, is actually a natural occurrence. What I want to suggest is that we go from this negative, divisive fear campaign of fear and loathing. Oh, you must all fear the weather changing, and in 30 years from now, so you all must go broke now to save the people in the future, 30 years from now. So people must be sacrificed by the elite. They want to sacrifice the poor for some sort of idea they're going to look like they're the heroes of saving the climate, and they're wrong. And you have to look at them and think there's a pretty sad sort of people that would sacrifice others for their beliefs. In fact, it's primitivism. What I want to suggest is that climate change and climate science never was the right science. It's always been an evolutionary economic matter. So we say, okay, we're going to reduce emissions altogether by 2050, and at that time we must have a concurrent or parallel system, an economic process, which means that it's a positive outcome for all humanity, not just the elite, while they're causing poverty across a greater number of people, while the bankers and the elite acquire all the property and assets of the people, because that's what's actually happening. So we'll give it a practical example is the best way to illustrate this. Say in North Queensland, where there's an abundance of coal, they've got a place there, they want to make a mine called their Darney mine. That mine is within west of the barrier ranges, so any runoff from there cannot possibly flow into a barrier reef. That is just so much nonsense, it's ridiculous. That anyone actually would say that makes a complete fool of themselves, or they are actually very, very dishonest people and should no longer be listened to. But say we have the coal mine, it goes ahead like it should go ahead, and it should have been gone ahead by now, exports the coal to China because Australia needs the royalties to pay for all its services and its social programs, which is a socially responsible thing to do by government. If at the same time they build this coal mine, they should have in the design of that a power station driven by that coal to run the whole process. So it's economically viable then, because it creates its own energy systems, and that makes it a very economic processing to run the rails, run all the trucks, or whatever. And as more electric vehicles come online, then it allows you to reduce emissions. But the biggest cause of emissions in the world is cars, not power stations. So if we generate electricity from coal, and the clean coal the clean ones we've got now, the new technology what is clean, if we use that to power electric vehicles, we're actually creating a net reduction in CO2, and the real CO2 is cars. But if you have a power station run by the coal from next to a Darney, and then with that power station you could also create water out of the air, which is because plenty of that on the net where you can find that can be done. If then you feed the CO2 in a bio-sequestration process, that is, it goes into some huge sheds that are built for the purpose of growing various flora. Hemp is a good one, because hemp, it will be accelerated in its growth because of the available water. We can feed in nutrients, and the main amount of CO2 fed into the soils will actually accelerate the growth of hemp. Hemp can be used for medicines, for feeding cattle, to make biofuels, to make biodegradable plastics, insulations, all sorts of material can be made from that. So it creates a whole new industry, or potentially whole series of industries within that part of Queensland. If then we have the water, and if we're going to create the water, what they should also do with this is put wind generators up within this system. Wind generators have a very important role to play, but they're not the one they're doing now. But what wind generators do is help move water around, and also help create more water, because the electricity generated can then be used to create evaporation units that create more water. This is part of a system that begins then to drought-proof Australia. Not only that, because of the amount of trees from seeds, you can grow endlessly, constantly a supply of tree stocks that are suitable for the internal regions of Australia, down within the river systems, so we can plant so many trees in the next 30 years or so using this system, that by the time this coal-fired power station is finished in 2050, will be decommissioned, then you've got millions of trees planted, which then suck in the CO2. They will consume then, because they'll be growing, they will consume the CO2 what's already in the atmosphere. So this is actually a mathematically positive, economically positive. And instead of looking at climate change as something to fear, we all must fear climate change, no, it actually says let's make something very positive out of it for the country, for the environment, by growing lots of green things. Greenies should be growing green things, not stopping green things being grown. Green is anti-productive people, therefore anti-environmental people, because if you're really interested in the environment, then you would be involved in creating more greenery within the environment, using what energy sources we can. At the same time, because you are creating job opportunities and economic well-being for a whole lot of thousands of people, it helps then develop the whole north of Queensland, so it becomes another big, you can have millions of people living there. It's a perfect environment to have millions of people live in warm environments like they do in Singapore and Malaya. Millions of people around the world live in these hot tropical areas, so it's not unusual to have other places in Australia where has a few million people live in the area, because you've allowed it to be developed economically, having cheap power, and you've allowed them to, because that generates a sort of excitement instead of apathy. We're all going to give up because the Greenies of Sydney say we must give up. The Greenies of Sydney are saying your children up in North Queensland can't have new shoes, and you can't have a new car, and we can't have housing investment for all people in North Queensland, because we want it all. And at the same time, to cover up from our dirty work, we want to look good and clean by saying we're saving the planet. It's hypocrisy. It's very shallow-minded, and shows you that you can have a positive and pragmatic and practical approach to a challenge such as climate change is, and climate is a challenge for Australia anyway. But by engaging our higher minds and our practical minds, applying science and our knowledge, just through engineering and technology, we can actually get a great positive outcome from a climate change in Australia, and at the same time do something directly positive about the environment. And at the same time, because we're going to grow millions of trees out of this process, at the end of the 2050, when then you start to suck in or start to consume, if everyone in the world by 2050 has a plan like this, a positive approach, we plant millions of trees everywhere, then time you decommission all these coal-fired power stations in 2050, if that's your target, you've got millions of more trees then to suddenly consume the CO2 out of the atmosphere, and you've actually improved the environment worldwide at the same time. And that's the discussion we need to have to turn this thing around from putting fear and hate and division into children, and to put into the children positive happiness, hope. We don't live in fear. We live with looking forward to the future, not fearing it. Otherwise you create social decay, which is exactly what these people on the left are doing, trying to destroy society from within, because they're puppets to an hierarchy, a global hierarchy, and we're a democracy. And it's only by speaking freely like I have just done that we can stop the rot. My name is Graham, and I thought I'd put another spin on climate change. Thank you.